How's it going, everyone? Today I want to show you how to install Ubuntu 24.04, codenamed Noble Numbat. This is the next big LTS release, aka long-term support release. The goal of this video will be to show you how to install it from start to finish. If you are unfamiliar with my channel, I try to show everything exactly as you would see it from beginning to end. Before I begin, I just want to remind you that all the websites I show in this video will be in the description below for ease of access. I also would appreciate it if you go ahead and like the video if you find it useful, and please subscribe to my channel to keep up with all my latest projects and guides. Anyhow, with all that out of the way, let's get started. So currently I'm just going to show on Ubuntu's website here that it is showing 22.04.4 LTS as the stable release right now. Now, since this video is being done just a couple of days ahead of the actual release of Noble Numbat, that's why this is showing this current version. However, once it actually releases, which the expectation is going to be April 25th, then they should update this so that it will say Ubuntu 24.04 here. And of course, the download link and all that good stuff will be slightly different. However, one thing I do want to show off is the system requirements. Now, yes, this is for 22.0.4, but generally speaking, these requirements aren't going to change too much from this current state. And one thing just to mention is that these are the minimum system requirements. My personal opinion is the processor looks fine here. However, I usually recommend 8 GB of system memory or RAM or better. And then this day and age, it should be pretty easy to come up with that amount of free hard drive space. Now, one thing I also want to mention is that this day and age, I personally don't recommend dual booting operating systems, especially if your other operating system is a Windows environment. With Microsoft releasing updates, it has a good chance of outright botching your Linux bootloader, so you'll just run into issues if you dual boot. Some people, to get away from the potential of having updates nuke their bootloader, is to have separate drives for the operating systems. But in my mind, if I'm going to use a different operating system, then I generally just have a different machine. That way it's just one OS. That's the only thing I have to worry about. Anyhow, I just want to throw that out there. One thing also to mention before we continue on is that you're going to want a USB thumb drive. You could technically burn this to a DVD, but this day and age, USB thumb drives just make it much easier, much faster. Just use one of those. But anyhow, my recommendation is an 8 GB or larger drive. Ideally, you would have a USB 3.0 drive. However, if you have a USB 2.0 stick, that's fine as well. It's just going to be slower. It's going to take longer in order to get Rufus to push the ISO to it. And it's also going to take longer to boot from it when the time comes. So if you can, USB 3.0 or better is my recommendation. And I will have a link for recommended thumb drives if you don't have any in the description below as well. So what you would do is go ahead and click on download here. It will begin the process of downloading the ISO. Now it is a good size file here, so just be patient. Depending on your internet connection and all that good stuff, it could take some time. And then once you have the ISO downloaded, then move over to Rufus. Now Rufus, if you haven't seen any of my previous videos or you haven't used Rufus before, is a very lightweight utility which doesn't actually install itself on your computer. It's just a simple executable that you can kick off, and you can just format a thumb drive and make it bootable, and it pushes all the ISO files to it. It's very nice and handy, and it's free. The key thing is that unfortunately the website is pretty well littered now with download buttons. So what I do is I just scroll down to this section here and then just select the executable that is for your environment. So if you have a 64-bit Windows machine, that you can choose this one. If you have a 32-bit Windows machine, that you can choose this one here. So you would just go ahead and download Rufus, and then I'll just open up my downloads folder here, and we can actually close out of Edge. What I like to do is I like to take Rufus and I like to stash it on the desktop, and then I'm just going to minimize my downloads here. And one thing just to also mention is that you will need admin rights on your machine in order to do all of this. So make sure you have that, otherwise it's not going to work. So I'm just going to double click on Rufus, click on yes for the UAC, and then I'm going to click on the select button up here, and then I'm just choosing this. Now this is the beta, but this is just to show it in the video. It will not say beta when you actually download the official stable release here. I'm going to click on open, and I'm just going to leave everything as is here. That looks fine. We'll click on start, and then it's going to reach out and pull down some files. I always choose whatever it recommends. So let's click on OK. And then again, it's going to request to reach out for some stuff. So I'm just going to click yes. And then it's going to warn us that everything on our thumb drive is going to be nuked. So if you have any data on your thumb drive, this is your chance to back it up before we click OK and it gets destroyed. So I'm going to click on OK as there is nothing on there that I need, and then just be patient as it crunches along. All right, now that that is done, we can close out of Rufus. Now at this point in time, this is also a reminder that if you have any data that needs to be saved on the machine before we start the Ubuntu installation process, go ahead and save it now. And then the other thing is going to be us actually trying to get the machine to boot from the thumb drive. Now unfortunately, every manufacturer and every model for that manufacturer can be different. It could be the F1 key, F2 key, F4 key, F5, F6, F7, F8, F9, F10, F12, or even the delete key. So my recommendation is if you don't know what the key is for your machine to boot from a thumb drive, I would recommend looking it up on Google. Just Google your manufacturer and model number, and that should point you in the right direction of how to get it to boot from the thumb drive. Since I'm using a Lenovo M720Q tiny desktop, I know that it is the F12 key, so I'm going to reboot my machine, and then I'm going to keep mashing the F12 key until it gets to the boot order prompt. So I'm going to do that now, and it should any moment now accept it. Alrighty, so I'm going to use the down arrow key, and here's my USB thumb drive, so I'm going to hit enter for this. Now, of course, every boot device menu is slightly different, but it usually is pretty self-explanatory. And then I'll just be patient as it loads up here. One thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the down arrow key real quick here, because in the bottom it actually gives you about 25 to 30 seconds to actually choose something in GNU Grub here in order to continue on. So I'm just going to hit the top one, try or install Ubuntu. One of the reasons as to why it says try is because this is considered a live OS. So it's a portable operating system on the thumb drive. However, every time you would reboot it, you would just be nuking whatever configurations you set. And that's why we're going to install, which will also increase the performance big time in how everything reacts. And of course allows for customization of your configurations. But once again, depending on how fast the machine is, how fast your USB chipset is on the machine, and then of course what USB version you're using for the thumb drive, everything's going to come into its own here. Preparing Ubuntu. All right, so the first option you're going to be seeing is going to be choosing your language. So naturally select the language that you need to select in here. I'm going to leave English. That's perfectly fine for me. I'm going to click on next. Next is going to be the accessibility options in Ubuntu. I'm not going to be needing to choose anything in here. However, if you do need to, then feel free to click in and modify those settings. I'm going to click next. Next up is going to be your keyboard layout. Once again, if you need to customize anything, do so here. English US is perfectly fine for me. You can also try to click on the detect button if you want to see if that will automatically assign the right keyboard layout for you. I'm going to click next. Next up is going to be to connect to the internet. So I strongly recommend, at least for the installation process of Ubuntu, that you have it as a hardwired connection. However, if your machine doesn't have an Ethernet NIC on it, then you would just choose the connect to Wi-Fi option here. However, I'm going to leave it as use Wi-Fi connection, but connect to Wi-Fi network is pretty straightforward if you need to do so. I'm going to click on next. In this case, there's actually an update for the installer, so I'm going to click on update now. That way everything is latest and greatest. And I'm going to close the installer. And then up in the top left here is the install release. Let's click on that and then choose what you need to through the first few selection options once again. I'm just going to click next through all this since everything is fine. I'm going to leave it on the interactive installation. However, if you have an autoinstall.yaml file, then you can choose this option, but we do not. And for the sake of this video, I'm going to continue on with the interactive installation. We're going to click next. You do have two options here. One is going to be the default selection, which is just the essentials, web browser, and basic utilities. The other is going to be the extended selection, which, as it says, an offline-friendly selection of office tools, utilities, and web browser. Now, of course, if you select the default selection to begin with, you can always install everything else after the fact. So for the sake of this video, we're going to go with a squeaky clean basic setup here. So we're just going to select this one, hit next, and then there is the option to install recommended proprietary software. For me personally, I recommend selecting the install third-party software for graphics and Wi-Fi hardware, and then I also recommend download and install support for additional media formats. And as you can see, they're pretty self-explanatory. The first one, including but not limited to NVIDIA drivers and similar. And then the other one for download and install support for additional media formats is including but not limited to MP3, MP4, MOV files, and similar. So we'll click next. Now, generally speaking, you should be able to just use the erase disk and install Ubuntu, start from scratch on your selected disk. Now, if you want to go against my recommendations of having a dual boot machine, then you would potentially go into the manual installation option, or you can go into advanced features. Then you can go into the manual installation option and try to carve out a partition of your disk and so on. But anyhow, for the sake of this video, we're going to just stick with erase the disk and install Ubuntu. One thing just to show you is in the advanced features, you can actually change up your options here. Now you can research these and figure out which ones you actually want to use, but for the sake of this video, we are just going to leave it as none for the advanced features. So I'm going to click cancel here, and then we're going to click on next, and that's going to ask you for your name, and I'll just type in Digital Scriptorium, and it's going to give you an option to change your computer's name, which I'm just going to call it Noble. And then you also have the option to change up your username. Just to make things easier here, I'm just going to set it as Digital is my username. And then you're going to have the password option here. So I'm going to just type in a very basic password, and it's mentioning that it is weak, and that is because it is a very, very weak password. But for the sake of this video, I'm just going to use it. But I strongly recommend that you go for something that is complex and relatively lengthy. 10 characters or even 15 characters would probably be the ideal option to go with. I'm going to leave require my password to log in. If you're using Active Directory, then you can choose this option. However, since I'm just a basic consumer in this case without an Active Directory set up, I'm just going to continue on. Active Directory would be more for a business environment or school environment. So I'm going to click on next. And then here you can choose your time zone. I am going to just tab it over to the Eastern time zone in the New York region. We'll click on next. And then this is just reviewing your choices. That all looks fine to me. So I'm going to click on install and then just be patient. One thing, if you're curious to see if anything is happening, you can also go down to the right-hand corner here, click on the little terminal button, and it will show if things are crunching along here. All right, so if all went well, then you should be greeted by this installation complete screen. One thing to mention is if you're questioning if anything is happening when it is at the curtain command in target portion of the installation, I've learned just be patient. Sometimes that portion can just take a very long time to actually move forward from. In my case, it took almost 30 minutes for it to finally crunch past that part, even though it was a 6-core 8th gen Intel i7 with 16 gigs of RAM and a Samsung solid-state drive. So, like I said, just be patient. Anyhow, let's click on Restart Now. And one thing to note is that you may want to pull the thumb drive as soon as the machine actually goes down and then starts firing back up. So I'm going to pull it right now, and we'll just wait for it to fire up here. We should be seeing the Ubuntu loading screen here, and then we should be at our login screen here. So I'm just going to click on my login account here, and I'm just going to type in my unfortunately very weak password, hit enter, and let's just complete all of our configurations here. So let's click on next, and then I'm going to skip the Ubuntu Pro, but as you can see here, you can always enable Ubuntu Pro later via the Software and Updates application. We're going to click on Next. This is completely up to you if you want to share your information. In my case, I'm just going to leave it as is, but if you don't want to, then just go ahead and check No, Don't Share System Data. So we'll click Next, and then we can just click Finish. And one thing I'll do real quick is I'm just going to right-click on the desktop, going to go to Display Settings. I'm going to change the resolution to the resolution of my screen here, 1920 by 1080. Generally speaking, it should automatically sync to your proper resolution, but since I'm using a PyKVM, it can sometimes not auto-detect what its maximum video output is. So I'm just going to close out of this here. All right, so let's just go over a few basic things within Ubuntu 24.04. in case you're unfamiliar with Ubuntu in general. So up in the top right-hand corner is going to be your power options and your network options and your volume options. So if you have Wi-Fi, then it will show up here. And if you click on the little tab, then it will show your local wireless SSIDs that are within range, and you can select them here. If you also have a wired connection, then this will show up. And if you click on this, then it just shows your status and that it is wired, and you can technically disconnect it here. And you can also get into your wired settings here. There's the night light in case you want to reduce your blues. There's the power modes, and I always find that balanced is right on par with what I need. In the very rare circumstance of actually needing a lot of performance and balanced isn't giving it, then you can click on performance. If you're on a laptop and you're really trying to conserve battery power, then you can also set it to power saver, and that does help keep the battery alive longer. And there's also the power settings option within here. There's the style, so there's currently by default it's on the light. If we click on dark, then it brings us into the dark style. Which generally speaking, dark modes can help save battery power as well. And then in the top is going to be your volume bar. And then if you click on the little volume icon, then that's going to mute it. And then unclicking it is going to restore your volume. And then there's the power button up here, and that gives you the option to suspend, restart, power off, or log out. I'm just going to click out of this here. There's the lock button, so that would make it so you can lock the workstation to where it will keep your applications running in the background, but it will prompt with the username and password in order to get back in. There's the gear here, which will get you into your settings. Let's go back up here. And then there is kind of the screenshot application tool here. So you have the opportunity to do a selection. So you can do an area selection. You can do a screen selection. If you have applications open, then the window selection also becomes available. The other thing is that you can also make it so that it does a screen record instead of just taking a screenshot. And then to capture, then you just click this little button here, almost like on a cell phone. And we can close out of that. Generally, in the bottom right-hand corner is going to be your home folder. We can double click on that, and I will expand this out. So starting from the top, here's your recent files section. So if I actually opened any files, then they should be showing up in here. However, since this is a fresh install and I haven't opened anything yet, there are no recent files. There's the starred files section, or the favorited files. So here's your home folder, which is what we initially went into. So this is the home folder for your user account, or personal folder as they'll call it. There's your documents. And one thing just to note is if you look right under the documents, it actually shows the full directory for where the documents is actually pointed to. And as you can see, it's in home, digital, aka my username, and then documents. There's the downloads. And once again, they all show the full file directory underneath. Music section, pictures, videos, trash. And if you actually had anything in here and you want to empty it, you can click on empty trash. If you click on other locations, this gives more of a larger breakdown of everything. And you can also do a search up here. And this is also a good spot to look at in case you are questioning how much free space your machine has. So in this case, here is my main drive, and it's showing the amount available here. And then if you have any network servers or network machines, then they will show up here. And we can close out of this. And then over on the left-hand side is going to be Firefox, which is your basic web browser, which comes pre-bundled in here. So this is all pretty self-explanatory. I'm not going to import from previous browser. Save and continue. Skip this step. You can personalize it with add-ons if you want to. Skip this step and then start browsing. And like I said, your general use Firefox browser right here, working right out of the box. We can close out of this. And then you are going to have your files, which just brings us right back to essentially your home icon that was down here on the right. There's the App Center. So this is where you can download applications and you can search for them up here. So feel free to dig into all that stuff. There's the help section. And so this is all sorts of help guides and what have you in here. You can search for things, so that can be helpful. We'll close it to that. And then you have your trash or recycling, whichever you want to call it. And then once again, you can empty the trash. If there's anything in here, we can close out of that. In the very top left is going to be kind of your screen selector, I guess you would call it. So you can have multiple screens of applications if you wanted to. Also, one thing I did not mention is in the top center is going to be your calendar. This is also going to be your notifications section. So if there's notifications that popped up and then disappeared, you can click on this and they generally have a notifications history in here unless you clear them. There's also a do not disturb, and then here's your calendar. If you have anything scheduled on your calendar, then it can show up here. You can add world clocks, stuff like that. We can close out of that. In the bottom left, if we click on show apps, and this is going to show every single application that is currently on the machine, and we can close out of that. Going back to right-clicking on the desktop. So you can do a new folder. If you copied or cut anything, you can paste it. You can select all. You can arrange icons. You can further arrange the icons with this submenu here. You can show desktop in files. You can open in terminal. You can change the background. Let's click on change background. And so once again, this is going to show your styles. So by default, the default mixed light mode was on, and I just set it to dark. You can feel free to change it back here if you like. You can set your general colors here. And then there's going to be the backgrounds here. And so we can change it to this if we wanted to. And then if we just minimize it, then there's your background. And then if you don't like that, then you can choose a different one. And then there's the background as well. And then we can close this, and then we'll right click again. So there's the desktop icon settings and there's the display settings. So let's go into display settings just one more time. So like I said, this should all synchronize here automatically for you. However, feel free to change your orientation, the resolution, the refresh rate, the scale, and all that good stuff. While we're in here, let's go ahead and do more of a dive into settings as a whole. So you've got your Wi-Fi options. So once again, if you don't want to change things in the top right-hand corner, then you can go in here and take a look at stuff. And once again, visible networks would show up in this section here. Network is just showing general network information, and it also gives a few other options to change up things. There's the Bluetooth option. If I actually had a Bluetooth controller or adapter plugged in, then it would show up here. Displays, which is what we were on. Sound, so sound is going to show your output and your input devices. Sound levels. If you've got multiple output devices, they would show up here. You can feel free to adjust your output volumes, balance, over amplification, stuff like that. There's the power section. So once again, you have your performance, balanced, and power saver modes right here. And then you've got power saving options here. You may want to change up your screen blank time. Sometimes 5 minutes is too little, and it seems as though any chance that you take a look away from your monitor, it always seems as though it just goes blank. So you may want to change that. Automatic suspend. I generally recommend keeping this off, which it is by default. There's the power button behavior. So you can suspend, power off, or do nothing. I just recommend keeping that as default. There's the multitasking section. All sorts of settings in here that you can feel free to fine tune. There's the appearance section, which is just our background section that we saw previously. There's Ubuntu Desktop, so you can feel free to customize things in here. There's the apps, so here's all of the installed apps. Notifications, if you want to change up your notifications. The search options are in here. You've got your online accounts, if you want to set any of those up. There are system sharing, mouse and touchpad, if you want to fine tune any of this stuff, and you can also test your settings. Keyboard, in case you want to adjust your keyboard stuff after the fact. Colors, printers, if you need to add a printer. Your accessibility options, if you need to fine tune them after the installation process. Privacy and security, lots of good stuff in here. And then there is system. And one thing you can take a look in your system is the about section. And this will give you general information on your machine. And then you can also go to system defaults, which gives a little bit more information on your machine. We can close out of this. And I'm just going to hit the back button here. One thing I want to go over are the software updates. So let's click on this. So it's going to query for updates. If you see this, not all updates can be installed. You can just go ahead and click on continue. And then we will click on install now. And we can click on details and it'll show you exactly what's happening. Updates are a huge thing to do to prevent security vulnerabilities, fix bugs, stuff like that. So we'll click continue and OK. And let's take a look at software updates one more time. And let's just try the partial upgrade just to see what happens here. Type in your password. And we can take a look and see what it's doing in terminal here. And we can take a look at the details here so you can see what's being installed, what's no longer needed and is being removed, and then what's being upgraded. So we can click on start upgrade and then just be patient as it crunches here. And if you click on terminal, you can also see everything that's happening here. Upgrade complete. We can click close for that. And let's kick off software updates one more time and see what it spits out. In this case, it's all up to date. That's perfect. One thing you can also take a look at is if you go to settings, and then this is going to give you a breakdown of all of your different update options that you can feel free to toggle here. There's a number of other sections in here, such as Ubuntu software, other software, updates, which is what we were on, authentication, additional drivers, developer options, and Ubuntu Pro. So once again, Ubuntu Pro, this is your section to go into if you wanted to toggle that on after the fact. We can close out of that, and we can close out of this, and get real quick, if we go back down to show all apps, you can also do a search in here. Even though it's right on this page here, we'll just do a search for terminal. Let's say we wanted to manually do updates. So the first thing you would do is sudo apt update, hit enter, type in your password, and then you can do sudo apt upgrade and hit enter. Nothing needs to be upgraded. In case you didn't want to use that other method to do updates, you can use the terminal to do the same exact thing. Anyhow, that's all you need to do to get Ubuntu 24.04 Noble Numbat installed. Again, I ask if you found this video to be useful, please like it, and make sure to subscribe to my channel to keep up with my latest video guides. Lots of interesting new projects are coming in the pipeline. Anyhow, until next time, take it easy.